disabled and ignored at her sister's wedding, until the ruthless mafia boss asked to dance. The Halcyon Pier ballroom was drowning in old money and cold light. Here in Port Orion, wealth was measured by how closely you could live to the ocean without being swept away by it. And this wedding was a fortress of coastal privilege. Light from a dozen crystal chandeliers cut the air into sharp, glittering knives. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Atlantic was a sheet of black glass. The string quartet wasn't playing music. They were playing a soundtrack for an expensive funeral, a waltz that moved with the same chilly, inevitable rhythm as the tide. I was the shipwreck at the edge of the grandeur. My name is Tamsin Kerr, and I was banished. Table 28. It was the last one, pushed so close to the swinging kitchen doors that I felt the rush of air and the clatter of plates every 30 seconds. I was the sister of the bride, invisible. My carbon fiber leg brace, a sleek black shell over my right calf, felt heavy and alien under the silk of my bridesmaid dress. My cane, polished walnut, leaned against the tablecloth. The brace and the cane were necessities, artifacts of an osteogenesis imperfecta that made my bones brittle. But here, they were symbols of my inconvenience. My sister, Piper, was across the room, a vision in white, marrying Adrian Montalto. Adrian was slick, all perfect teeth and expensive cologne, a man who spoke in promises that evaporated on release. He was arrogance polished to a high shine. Seriously, let's hope Tamsin doesn't try the dance floor, one of Adrian's groomsmen slurred, leaning across our table. He was drunk on champagne and self-importance. Might scratch the parquet with that thing. A polite, strained titter went around the table. The sound of forced laughter is worse than any insult. I felt the heat rise in my neck, a familiar burn of humiliation. I focused on the crease in my napkin, folding it, unfolding it. I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't ruin Piper's day. She deserved this moment, even if she was marrying him. I swallowed the bitterness until it settled like silt at the bottom of my stomach. Then the atmosphere in the ballroom changed. It didn't just shift, it fractured. The air pressure dropped. The music seemed to falter, the first violinist's bow skipping a beat. It was as if a door had been opened directly to the cold winter pier outside. A man stepped into the main archway. He didn't just enter a room, he claimed it. He was tall, dressed in a black suit so exquisitely tailored it seemed to absorb the light around him. No logos, no flash, just precision. His stillness was more commanding than any gesture. He paused, and his gaze swept the room. It wasn't a glance, it was an inventory. It was the look of a man cataloging every sin, every weakness, every exit. In 1 second, he had filed us all away. I saw Adrian, standing near the towering cake, freeze. The color drained from his face, leaving his spray tan looking like a cheap orange mask. The man, Aurelian Cruz, moved. He moved like a panther, silent and deliberate, cutting a straight line through the mingling guests who parted for him instinctively. He stopped at the groom's side. I was too far to hear it all, but the tension was a physical thing, a tightening wire. My invitation must have been lost. Aurelian Cruz's voice was low, smooth, but with a gravelly undertone that promised friction. "Cruz, this is my wedding," Adrian stammered, trying to reclaim his authority and failing. "And a beautiful one. Pity to interrupt." A pause. "The order at Dock 12. It's late." "This isn't the time." "Time is the one thing you're running out of." Cruz's smile didn't touch his eyes. "Fix it before the tide turns." The threat hung in the air, clearer than any shout, then, just as quickly. Cruz dismissed Adrian with a slight turn of his head. He was the boss of the Fenlight District, the shadow owner of the port, and he had just reminded everyone who truly ran Port Orion. His eyes scanned the room again, passing over the politicians, the bankers, the socialites, and they landed on me, on table 28, on the inconvenient sister by the kitchen door. He started walking. My breath caught. He wasn't walking past me. He was walking to me, The murmuring of the crowd died. The quartet played on, their cold music now the only sound. He cut through the room, a shark moving through shallow water, and stopped directly in front of my chair. He did not loom. He did not offer a hand down from on high. Aurelian Cruz bent at the knee, a fluid motion, bringing his gaze level with mine. He wasn't kneeling, not quite, but it was a gesture of deliberate equalization. His eyes were dark, almost black, and held an intensity that was neither kind nor cruel, but terrifyingly present. He saw the cane, he saw the brace, and his expression did not change. There was not one flicker of the pity I despised. He extended a hand. It was strong, calloused, a working man's hand despite the perfect suit. "My honor, I believe?" he asked. The entire ballroom ceased to exist. There was only the low timbre of his voice and the absolute authority in his gaze. This was not a request. It was a command wrapped in the linen of courtesy. My hand was trembling, but I placed it in his. His grip was firm, warm, and secure. He rose, drawing me up with an effortless strength that accommodated my imbalance without highlighting it. I grabbed my cane, but he was already moving, positioning himself at my right side, his body a solid wall. "The cane is for balance," I murmured, my voice sounding rusty. "Then I am for strength," he replied, his voice for me alone. He guided me onto the polished dance floor. He didn't pull me. He didn't push. He didn't accommodate me with the awkward, halting steps others used. Instead, he took the lead, and his first step was timed perfectly with the slight drag and click of my brace. He made my limp part of the waltz. Click, step, glide, click, step, glide. He turned my deficit into the rhythm section of the dance. His left hand was on my shoulder blade, not my waist. A subtle shift that gave me more support. It was the most practical, most shockingly intimate gesture I had ever experienced. His hand was a promise. It said, "In this moment, you do not have to apologize for existing." The silence in the ballroom broke. It wasn't silence anymore. It was a vacuum, sucking in every gasp and whisper. The music swelled, the quartet rushing to catch up to the drama. I looked past his shoulder. Piper was watching, her lips pressed into a thin, white line. Adrian looked apoplectic, his face flushed with a fury that was all about his stolen spotlight. The groomsman at my table looked like he'd swallowed his tongue. The pity was gone from the room, replaced by a potent cocktail of curiosity and raw fear. I was no longer the broken sister. I was the property of Aurelian Cruz. He pulled me fractionally closer. The scent of him was clean, sharp, like salt air and expensive wool. "There's a code in play," he said, his lips near my ear, his voice a vibration against my skin. The contrast between his public gesture of the dance and the private urgency of his words made my nerves scream. "What?" "This party, it's a game. Are you listening to the music?" I focused. The waltz, it was cold, repetitive. "It's just a waltz." "No, listen beneath it. The first violin. They are signaling with the motif." His hand tightened on my shoulder, steadying me as he guided us through a slow turn. I need observant ears. I was told this family was clean, but this music says otherwise. I am a haptic engineer. I design technology that translates sound and data into tactile sensation for the differently abled. My life is patterns. My brain is wired to find them. I closed my eyes for a second, filtering out the clink of glasses, the whispers. I found the violinist's line. It was a simple melody, but he was right. There was something underneath, a recurring phrase, almost a mistake, inserted at the end of every fourth bar. It was a numeric pattern, 3 short notes, 1 long, 4 short, 2 long, 3, 1, 4, 2. It repeated, again and again. 3, 1, 4, 2, I whispered, my voice shaking. His eyes snapped to mine, the black pupils flaring. "What did you say?" "The pattern, it's a loop. 3, 1, 4, 2. I felt the blood drain from my face as the implications hit me. That's not a musical choice. That's a grid reference. That's how we map container locations at the port. His grip on my shoulder blade tightened. Not painfully, but with a sudden, absolute focus. The waltz continued around us, a meaningless swirl of pastel dresses and dark suits, but the world had compressed to the 3-foot space between us. Grid reference, he confirmed, his voice dropping lower, the gravel in it turning to steel. The Marrowgate outfit, my competition, they are filth. He guided me in a slow turn, his movements never faltering, using the dance as the perfect cover for a conversation that should not be happening. This wedding isn't a celebration, Miss Kerr. It's a silent auction. They're using your sister's reception as a shield. An auction for what? I whispered, my mouth dry. My gaze darted to the string quartet. The first violinist smiled blandly at the crowd, his bow moving, signaling. Not drugs, not weapons, something worse. His eyes were black holes, pulling in all the light. A precursor, they call it Seraph 13. It's a chemical compound, cheap to make, impossible to trace. They use it to cut opioid supplies across the Rust Belt. It stretches their product, but it's volatile. It's the reason hundreds of people have gone to sleep and never woken up. It's poison, sold as pleasure. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. This wasn't a turf war over territory. This was mass poisoning for profit. The motif is the palette manifest, he continued, his breath warm against my temple. Every variation in the harmony, a shift in the cello or the viola. It's a new coordinate. The man with the violin. He isn't a musician tonight. He's the auctioneer. He's the coordinator. The waltz was ending, the final notes hanging in the air. He didn't release me immediately, guiding me instead toward the relative shadows of an alcove near my abandoned table. My mind was racing, connecting his words to the patterns I'd heard. There's more, I said, my voice gaining a strange clarity. It wasn't just the 3-1-4-2 loop. I heard variations. A stress on the cello and a slide on the viola. They weren't in the original score. I leaned against the cool marble wall, using it to stabilize myself as I fumbled in the small, beaded bag looped on my wrist. I pulled out a short tube of crimson lipstick, a napkin from a nearby tray. I clicked the tube open and began to draw on the flimsy paper. My work? I design haptic interfaces, I explained, my hand moving quickly, the waxy lipstick dragging. I translate data into patterns, into vibrations. That's all this is. I drew a simple crosshatch grid. This is Doc 12, the pattern. 3-1-4-2 is the baseline, but the cello stress, that selects the row. The viola slide selects the unit. I circled a single square on the napkin. They're moving one specific palette, right now. I looked up. Aurelian Cruz was watching my hand, his face impassive, but his eyes were alive with a sharp, calculating intelligence. He looked from the napkin to my face, and for the first time, his expression shifted. It was surprise, mingled with a dangerous intrigue. He reached out and took the napkin from my hand. He studied it for a beat. Miss Kerr, he said, the ghost of a smile touching his lips, you make me owe you a thank you, and perhaps a war. Tamsin. The spell broke. My sister's voice was sharp, panicked. She was marching toward us, pulling Adrian Montalto by the hand. Adrian's face was a mask of thunder. What in God's name do you think you're doing? Adrian hissed. He didn't even look at Aurelian. His fury was entirely for me. Making a spectacle of yourself, flirting with this gutter trash. Adrian, please, Piper whispered, her eyes wide with fear, darting between her new husband and me. Stay away from my sister-in-law, Cruz, Adrian snarled, finally turning to the man beside me. This is a private event. Tamsin, this isn't right, Piper pleaded, her voice trembling. He's dangerous. This is Fenlight filth. You're embarrassing me. You're embarrassing the family. Please, just go back to the table. I felt the old, familiar shame rise in my throat, the command to be small, to be quiet, to not cause trouble. My hand tightened on my cane. Before I could answer, Aurelian moved. It was a subtle shift, placing himself just slightly in front of me, a living shield. His voice, when he spoke, was still quiet, almost unnervingly polite. "Gentlemen," he said, "the word landing like a carefully placed stone. Do not threaten women in public. It's terribly poor form." Adrian's face flushed a deep, mottled purple. He looked like he might swing. I looked at Piper, my sister, looking beautiful and trapped, her happiness already tarnished. I looked at Adrian, a bully who defined himself by who he could intimidate. And I thought about the hundreds of deaths Aurelian had laid at his feet. The shame evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, sharp anger. "Piper," I said, my voice cutting through the tension, steady and clear. It surprised even me. "He's not the one making threats here." I turned my back on my sister and my new brother-in-law, a deliberate, final turn. I looked up at Aurelian Cruz. This was the moment. The silence I had kept for my family, or the truth that was sitting in this room, as toxic as Seraph 13. "If he is right," I said, my voice rising just enough to be unmistakable, "then there are people who will die tonight because of what is happening at Dock 12. Piper gasped. Adrian's face went from red to white. It was the white of absolute panic. He knew. In that instant, I knew. He knew exactly what I was talking about. "We're done here," Adrian spat, grabbing Piper's arm. "This conversation is over." He dragged her away, back toward the head table, back to the illusion of the perfect wedding. Aurelian watched them go, his expression unreadable. He turned back to me. The assessment in his gaze was gone, replaced by something new. Respect. He reached into the inner pocket of his suit coat and produced a single, thick business card, cream-colored stock, embossed black letters. It read, "The Fenlight Resurrection Fund." "A legitimate cover," I stated. "A very profitable and very legal cover," he corrected. He held it out to me. "The rooftop greenhouse, 2 o'clock in the morning. We finished this conversation." 2 o'clock in the morning, on a secluded rooftop, with the head of the Fenlight Syndicate, it was the single most insane, dangerous idea I had ever heard. "Why me?" I asked, my hand still at my side. "Because you heard the music when everyone else just heard noise," he said. "I need to know what else you can hear." I thought of Piper's terrified eyes. I thought of Adrian's guilty face. "I'll come," I said, finally taking the card. The stock was heavy. "On one condition." A single dark eyebrow raised. "My sister, Piper, she's trapped in this, but she's not part of it. She doesn't know. Whatever you are planning, whatever happens next, she stays safe. She's to be left out of it. Completely." Aurelian's expression hardened slightly. "I protect innocence. Miss Kerr," he said, his voice flat, final. "The guilty. They learn to protect themselves." It was the only assurance I was going to get. It would have to be enough. The string quartet struck up again. The mood shifted, a faster, lighter tune, a foxtrot. The brief intermission was over. Aurelian offered his hand, palm up. "One more dance. We are, after all, just celebrating a wedding." He led me back onto the floor. This dance was different. It was less of an interrogation, more of a performance. We were playing a part for the hundreds of watching eyes. The picture of a handsome man taking pity on the crippled sister. But I knew better. I was acutely aware of the solid strength of his hand on my back, the lethal secret that now pulsed between us, and the card that felt like it was burning a hole in my palm. When the song finished, he executed a formal, slight dip. He bowed, a deeply old-fashioned, deeply respectful gesture. "Miss Kerr," he said, and released me. He turned and walked away. He didn't fade into the crowd. He parted it. He didn't look back. I stood there for a moment, my brace clicking softly as I shifted my weight, my cane steadying me. I watched him go. I turned my head and looked past the heavy velvet drapes, out the massive windows. The Port Orion Bay was out there, black and silent, holding its secrets just as close as the man who was now walking toward it. The service elevator whined in protest, lifting me far above the dying embers of the wedding reception. When the doors opened at 2 o'clock in the morning, I stepped out onto the roof. The Halcyon greenhouse was a crystal box perched on the hotel's edge, a stark silhouette against Port Orion's bruised purple sky. The air was thick and humid, smelling of damp earth and crushed mint. A storm was rolling in from the Atlantic, and the wind sang a low, mournful note against the glass panes. Aurelian Cruz was already there. He stood with his back to me, facing the glass wall that overlooked the sprawling, skeletal network of the port. In the dim glow of the emergency lights, I saw he held a dry erase marker. He was sketching the layout of the docks directly onto the glass, his movements economical and precise. He didn't turn around. The click and soft drag of my cane and brace on the tile floor was all the announcement he needed. C-12, I said, my voice quiet but clear in the enclosed space. EO3 and F9. Those were the last coordinates the violinist played before the quartet took their final bow. He capped the marker and turned. His face was shadow, his eyes reflecting the distant city lights. They're moving 3 pallets. Marrowgate is getting bolder. It's a heavy risk, moving that much precursor in one night. They're using my sister's wedding to do it, I said, the bitterness returning. I moved to stand beside him, looking at the sprawling map he'd drawn. Why hasn't anyone stopped this? The police, the government? He gave a short, humorless laugh. The authorities, he tapped a finger against the glass. The Interstate Integrity Bureau, the IIB, supposedly handles this jurisdiction. They opened an inquiry into Seraph 13 6 months ago, tracked it to a single warehouse fire. He paused. Then, suddenly, the case was closed. Lack of evidence. The lead investigator retired to a beach house in Florida. The IIB is either compromised, incompetent, or on the payroll. I don't trust them. We're on our own. I understand compromised, I said, the words tight. I ran a hand along the metal frame of a planter. My last project, a haptic feedback system. I designed it after my last surgery. I gestured to my leg. It was meant to translate sensory data for people with nerve damage. My company waited until I was out of the hospital. Then they restructured the project right out from under me. Stole the patent. The first drops of rain began to speckle the glass roof, a soft, insistent drumming. They're launching it next quarter as a high-end gaming accessory. They told me my original vision wasn't marketable. Aurelian was quiet for a long moment. He looked from the port to the rain, to me. Talent like yours doesn't need permission from thieves. Tamsin. A jagged spear of lightning split the sky, illuminating the greenhouse in a brilliant, flickering white light. For one stark second, I was exposed. The light caught the network of faint, silvery scars that climbed my right calf above the carbon fiber brace, pale reminders of countless surgeries, of pins and rods that had failed before the brace finally held. I instinctively tensed, my impulse to hide, to cover myself. His gaze dropped to my leg. He saw the scars. He registered them, and just as quickly, his eyes lifted back to mine. There was no pity. There was no disgust. No invasive curiosity. It was just a fact, registered and filed away. It was a neutrality that felt more respectful than any words of comfort. The rain was a roar now, a sudden deluge hammering the glass. "If we go to the dock," he said, his voice cutting through the noise, "we maintain our cover. 2 guests, leaving the party for a private moment." He moved closer, and the air around him felt charged, separate from the storm. "But we can't look like we're fighting each other. We have to move as one. Show me how you move." I hesitated. "What do you mean?" "Show me," he repeated. "With the cane, I pivot on my left, my right leg. It's just for balance. It follows. And without the cane, I'm slower. I have to compensate." He nodded, a sharp, decisive motion. "Give me your hand." I placed my left hand in his. He didn't just hold it. He enveloped it. He placed my other hand on his shoulder. "We're not using the cane. Use me." His free hand settled on my waist, firm and solid. The warmth of his palm soaked through the silk of my dress, a shocking point of contact. "Now, walk with me, to the door." We took a step. I faltered immediately, my body tensing, expecting the instability. "Don't fight it," he murmured, his voice close. "Shift your weight onto me when you pivot. Let the brace follow the line of your hip, not lead it. Breathe with me." I inhaled, drawing in the scent of mint and the clean, sharp smell of his suit. He stepped forward. I exhaled and brought my right leg through, letting his strength take my weight. It was smooth. It was the waltz, but stripped of music, reduced to mechanics, breath, and a shared center of gravity. He was teaching me how to lean on him, and in doing so, he was making me move fluidly, confidently. We reached the end of the walkway and stopped beneath the dripping leaves of an ornamental citrus tree. The heavy smell of blossoms and rain filled the air. We hadn't released each other. His hand was still a solid weight on my waist, mine still gripping his shoulder. The atmosphere was no longer about practice. The air was heavy, charged by the storm outside and the kinetic energy thrumming between us. I watched his gaze drop from my eyes to my mouth. He held himself perfectly still, but I could feel the tension in his arm, the coiled strength under my hand. His breathing deepened, matching the rhythm of the rain. He looked back up at my eyes, a silent question that was more respectful than any advance. "May I?" he whispered, his voice rough. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird. I couldn't find my voice. I just nodded, a small, jerky movement. He leaned in slowly, agonizingly, giving me every fraction of a second to pull away. I met him halfway. The first touch of his lips was tentative, almost impossibly soft. It was a question, not a claim. It was just warmth and the faint, lingering taste of expensive whiskey. It was a stark contrast to the ruthless man who had terrified my brother-in-law. Then, as I leaned into the kiss, I felt his control snap. His other hand came up, fingers spreading gently, possessively, along my jawline, tilting my head, my own hands fisted in the material of his suit lapels, holding on as if the glass floor might give way. The kiss deepened, still slow, but now filled with a desperate, suppressed hunger. It wasn't rushed. It was a long, unfolding exploration. I felt the coiled strength in his shoulders, the power he was deliberately reining in. Our breath mingled, warm in the cool, mint-scented air. It was a silent promise of everything that could come after. And just as that promise began to ignite, just as the heat began to build into a fire, he broke the kiss. He rested his forehead against mine, his eyes closed, his breathing was unsteady. I could feel his heart hammering against his ribs, or maybe it was mine. He pulled back, a full, deliberate step, putting cool air between us. The spell was broken, but the echo of it shivered on my skin. "Tonight," he said, his voice regaining its steel. "Work first." He was right. The adrenaline of the mission, the danger, surged back, mixing with the new, confusing warmth in my blood. I smiled. A real smile this time. "Then let's go steal a piece of music." He nodded. All business once more. He pulled out his phone and took several high-resolution photos of the glass wall, capturing every detail of his map and my notes. Then, to my surprise, he ejected his SIM card, snapped the small chip in two between his thumb and forefinger, and tossed the pieces into a pot of ornamental ferns. "No trackers," he said. "Do the same." I followed his lead, my fingers fumbling slightly as I destroyed my own card. How do we communicate? I tapped the heavy, stylized cuff bracelet on my left wrist. It's a prototype, one of mine. I began manipulating the small, almost invisible interface. It's a haptic transmitter, designed for nonverbal communication. It works on a closed, shortwave frequency. I can link it to a small receiver you carry. I finish the modification. I tap. You feel the pulse. 1 pulse for move, 2 for danger, 3 for target acquired. "Clever," he said, a note of genuine admiration in his voice. He handed me a small, flat black receiver. I paired it. "We have one window," he said, shrugging into a light, dark jacket that had been stashed behind a planter. The security system at Dock 12 reboots every night at 3:30. It creates a full grid blackout. We will have exactly 90 seconds. 90 seconds to get in. Swap the marked pallets with the fakes my team has on standby, and get out. He held my gaze, the gravity of what we were about to do settling over us. Heavier than the storm. Ready, Tamsin. Dock 12 was a graveyard of giants. The massive container cranes were silent, skeletal arms reaching into the low-hanging fog. The air was thick with the smell of rust, cold salt, and diesel fuel. It was 3:28 in the morning. We weren't the only ones there. Aurelian's team, 4 of them, moved like gray ghosts. They wore the dark gray coveralls of the night shift longshoremen, their faces obscured by watch caps pulled low. They were a professional crew, all business. Checking silent, battery-powered tools, Aurelian-led, not with orders, but with a silent, forward motion that pulled them all in his wake. I was positioned slightly behind him, my cane a silent probe on the damp concrete, my other hand resting on my haptic cuff. I was the nerve center. He was the muscle. We took cover behind a stack of empty barrels, the metal cold against my back. The target containers, C12, EO3, and F9 were clustered under a bank of high-intensity sodium lamps, casting a sickly orange glow. 2 minutes, Aurelian breathed, his eyes fixed on the main security booth. A movement in the shadows by the loading gate. Not one of Aurelian's men. A figure stepped into the light. My stomach clenched. It was him, the first violinist from the wedding, still in his tuxedo, but now with a heavy peacoat thrown over it. He was carrying his violin case. "The coordinator," I whispered. "He's here." Aurelian swore, a single vicious word under his breath. "Why is he here? He's supposed to be clear." The violinist looked at his watch, then pulled a small radio from his pocket. He was speaking into it, his expression agitated. He was looking at the containers. Then, as if to calm his own nerves, he unlatched his case, but he didn't pull out a radio or a weapon. He pulled out his violin. He put the bow to the strings and played. It wasn't music. It was a short, frantic, scraping series of notes, a signal. And it was wrong. My blood went cold. "He changed it," I hissed. "The pattern, it's not 3142 anymore." My mind raced, translating the new screeching motif. "It's 2413. He's diverting the pickup. They've moved the real pallet." "Where?" Aurelian's voice was a blade. I scanned the stacks, my eyes following the grid he'd drawn on the greenhouse glass, the map now seared into my brain. 2413. It's not C12, it's B14, a different stack, closer to the water. He's signaling a last-minute swap to the buyers. Aurelian deduced instantly. To his own team. He looked at his watch. 3:29. We have no time to retask my men. The blackout is in 60 seconds. Then I'll retask them, I said. My fingers flew across the haptic cuff. It was a language I had invented, a staccato rhythm of pulses. Abort C12. New target B14. 2 pulses. 4. 1, 3. I felt Aurelian's receiver vibrate against his belt, a short, sharp buzz. His men, positioned around the yard, tensed as they received the same message. One of them, perched on a forklift, gave a barely perceptible nod. They were rerouted. Aurelian looked at me, his eyes bright in the gloom. He didn't say thank you. He just nodded. It was better. 3, 2, 1. The high-pitched whine of a portable power cutter screamed from the far side of the yard, where one of his men was slicing through the main junction box. The sound was immediately followed by a heavy, profound thunk, and the world went black. The orange sodium lamps died, plunging the dock into an absolute darkness, broken only by the distant, angry blinking of a red light on a far-off crane. The blackout was total. 90 seconds, Aurelian said. The night erupted in quiet, frantic action. From the shadows, his team's forklift, its headlights taped over to show only pinpricks of blue light, darted toward Stack B. I heard the high-torque whine of its electric motor. the clang of metal on metal as the forks found their purchase. Aurelian was moving. "Stay here." "Like hell," I said, moving with him, my cane finding purchase in the dark. We rounded the corner just as the forklift was pulling the real pallet, a heavy, shrink-wrapped cube, out of the stack. Another forklift, this one carrying a near-identical pallet of sandbags, was moving in to replace it. 70 seconds. Aurelian's voice was calm. The swap was made. The real pallet was loaded onto the bed of a small, nondescript flatbed truck. "We go," he said, grabbing my arm. Clang, clang, clang! A heavy metallic ringing from the gantry above us. Then a shout. "Hey, what the hell is that? The manifest is wrong." A beam from a powerful flashlight cut through the darkness, sweeping the yard. The violinist, he'd seen the swap. "Marrowgate's here," another voice yelled from the shadows. "They're hitting us." The flashlight beam found us, pinning us in its white, blinding circle. "It's Cruz. Get him." The sodium lamps flickered, then buzzed back to life, flooding the yard in that sick, orange light. The 90-second reboot was over. We were exposed. 2 men in dark clothes were sprinting toward us across the concrete. Another 2 were descending a metal staircase from the gantry above. "Truck go!" Aurelian yelled to his driver. The flatbed's engine roared, and it fishtailed out of the yard. "This way!" Aurelian pulled me toward a narrow bridge, a metal walkway that connected the tops of 2 massive container stacks. "We're not going to make it," I panted, my right leg screaming in protest at the sudden sprint. "We are." His hand was iron on my elbow, half lifting me. We clattered onto the metal walkway. The men were right behind us, their boots hammering on the steel. The bridge was narrow, swaying 30 feet above the ground. Aurelian was in front, pulling me. I glanced behind. The first man was 10 feet away, his face twisted in a snarl, a knife in his hand. To my right, a stack of smaller, empty pallets was lashed to the railing with a single, thick nylon strap, held in place by a heavy steel locking pin. I reacted. I ripped my arm from Aurelian's grasp, spun, and jammed the hooked handle of my walnut cane into the loop of the locking pin. "Tamsin, what are you—" I put my entire body weight onto my left leg, ignored the searing pain in my right, and pulled. The pin was heavy, slick with grease, but it slid free with a metallic shriek. "Get down!" I screamed. I yanked the cane free and dropped flat onto the walkway. The nylon strap snapped, and with a groan of tortured metal, the entire stack of pallets, a ton of wood and steel, slid off the bridge and crashed onto the concrete below, directly in the path of our pursuers. The 2 men on the ground scrambled back, barely avoiding being crushed. The men on the bridge skidded to a halt, cut off by the new chasm in the railing. We were clear. I was breathing like I'd run a mile. Aurelian hauled me to my feet. He looked from me to the wreckage below, then back to me. His expression was something I had never seen before, raw, unfiltered astonishment. "Come on," he said, his voice rough. "We're not done." We scrambled down the stairs on the far side, but as we reached the bottom, a scream cut through the air. Not a scream of rage, a scream of pain. "My leg, God, my leg, it's trapped." It was a dock worker, an older man in a high-visibility vest, caught in the chaos. He must have been making his rounds when the lights went out. He was on the ground, his leg pinned beneath a heavy coil of steel cable that had been dislodged by the falling pallets. Aurelian grabbed my arm. "Tamsin, we leave. Now. We can't help him." "No," I said, pulling free. "We're not leaving him." "It's not a request. My car is 50 yards away. We go." He tried to pull me again. I looked at the man, his face white with agony. I looked at Aurelian, his face a mask of ruthless necessity, and I made a choice. "Go then," I said, and limped toward the man. Damn it! Aurelian's voice was a low growl, but I heard his footsteps right behind me. "We can't lift it," he said, assessing the cable. "It's too heavy." "We don't have to," I said. "It's a locking ratchet. It's pinning his ankle. We need leverage." I saw a heavy-duty hammer lying on a nearby workbench. I grabbed it. "Hold this," I said, shoving my cane into Aurelian's hand. I knelt by the man, my bad leg protesting. "It's gonna hurt," I told him. "Don't move." I wedged the claw of the hammer into the ratchet mechanism. "Aurelian, your foot, right here." I pointed to the base of the hammer. "Hold it steady." He stared at me for a half a second, then did as I said, planting his boot on the steel. I gripped the hammer's handle. I closed my eyes, shifted my entire weight onto my stable left knee, and used every ounce of strength I had, translating power from my shoulders, through my core, into the lever. My body screamed, the brace creaked, the ratchet groaned. And then, with a loud snap, the lock released. The cable went slack. "Pull him," I yelled. Aurelian grabbed the man by his vest and dragged him clear. A sound, more terrifying than any gunshot, split the night, the high-low wail of a Harbor Safety Authority patrol boat's siren. It was close, getting closer. "They're here," Aurelian said. He was no longer looking at me with respect. It was something else. It was awe. "Everyone scatters. Now." He grabbed my hand, not my arm, my hand, and we ran. We didn't stop until we piled into a low, black sedan hidden in the deep shadow of a warehouse. The engine turned over with a deep, throaty rumble. Aurelian gunned it, fishtailing on the wet pavement, switching off the headlights as we plunged into a labyrinth of dark, narrow service alleys. I looked back. The dock was chaos. Flashing blue lights, men yelling, people running in every direction. We were clear. He drove with a focused, controlled violence, the car handling the sharp turns like an extension of his body. I was breathing hard, my hands shaking from the adrenaline. "You did good, Tamsin," he said, his voice low. "We did good," I corrected. He glanced in his rearview mirror. Again. A frown creased his forehead. "We've got a tail." I twisted in my seat, a black, heavy-duty pickup truck. It was 2 turns behind us, but it was matching our speed, its own lights off. "One of yours?" I asked. "No," he said, his voice grim. He made a sharp, unexpected left, cutting through a puddle that sent a wave of brown water over our windshield. The truck made the same turn, its tires squealing. "He's good," Aurelian muttered. He slammed the brakes, did a 180 in the middle of a wide alley, and hit the high beams, flooring the accelerator. We were playing chicken. The truck was forced to swerve. As it passed under a flickering security light, the glare illuminated its rear. My breath hitched. I saw the license plate. It was white and blue, a commercial plate, and I saw the logo on the tailgate, just below it, a stylized M intertwined with a globe. "Aurelian," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "That's a Montalto logistics truck." His face was granite. "Your brother-in-law." The pickup slowed, then turned, disappearing down a different alley. It wasn't chasing us anymore. It was just identifying us. I slumped back in the leather seat. The evidence wasn't a theory anymore. It wasn't a pattern in the music. It was here, in the metal and mud of the docks, following us home. Adrian was in this. He was in it deep. The morning light was an insult. It was pale gray, smelling of the receding storm, and it illuminated the ache in my joints and the raw chafe of my brace against my skin. The adrenaline from the dock was gone, leaving behind a residue of sour fear and the throbbing memory of leveraging my entire body against a steel ratchet. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a harsh, vibrating sound that made my heart leap into my throat. It was Piper. I answered, "Piper." Tamsin. Her voice was not her own. It was thin, high, and brittle, like a pane of glass about to shatter. "Tamsin, I don't know what to do." "What's wrong? Where are you?" "I'm at the hotel. Adrian's parents are here. They woke me up." I heard a muffled sob, a quick intake of breath. "They're angry, Tam, about the incident at the port last night. They said the family needs to present a unified front. They have papers. A lawyer is here." "Papers? What papers?" A cold dread settled in my stomach. A media authorization, a power of attorney for all public statements. They said it's to protect me, to protect the Montalto name, Adrian. Adrian says. I have to sign it. Piper, listen to me. I sat up, pushing the pain in my leg aside. My voice was cold and clear. Do not sign it. Do you understand me? Do not sign anything. But Tamsin, you don't understand. They're all looking at me. Find an excuse. Say you're ill. Say you need to speak to your own lawyer. Buy yourself 1 hour. Meet me. Salty sandwich shop at the fish market. Alone. Do you understand alone? The line went silent for a beat, then a tiny, okay, and a click. Aurelian's black sedan was parked across the street from Salty's, a silent panther in the morning mist. He had picked me up, his face grim, and listened to my account of the phone call without a word. He was watching the entrance now, his eyes hidden behind dark glasses. He was letting me do this, but he was here. Salty smelled of frying fish, old wood, and the sharp brine of the ocean. It was noisy, packed with fishermen and market workers. Anonymous, perfect. Piper slid into the booth 5 minutes later. She looked wrecked. She wore sunglasses, but I could see the red, swollen skin around them. Her hands, clasped on the table, were shaking. Her new wedding ring, a diamond the size of a thumbnail, looked like a prop, heavy and cold. I can't, Tam, she whispered immediately, not even waiting for me to speak. I can't just say no to them. Why not, Piper? He's lying to you. You don't understand. Her voice cracked, and she hunched forward, tears welling. The wedding, this ring, the necklace I wore last night. All of it. His mother, she sponsored it. That's the word she used. It wasn't a gift. Tamsin. It was a loan, a way to own me. She was crying freely now, heedless of the sawdust on the floor. If I defy him, they'll ruin me. They'll say I'm unstable. They'll call in the markers for everything. They'll take it all. I'll be left with nothing. I watched my sister, the woman who had always been the golden one, the one who floated through life, now utterly broken by the weight of the pretty things she'd been given. I slid my phone across the sticky table. I recorded this last night, at your reception. I pressed play. The tinny, scraping sound of the violin motif filled the small space. 3142. Piper just looked confused. It's the music. So what? It was a code. Piper for this. I slid a photograph across the table. Aurelian had sent it to me an hour ago. It was a close-up of the palette we had stolen, the side clearly stenciled with a biohazard symbol and the chemical designation Seraph 13. She stared at it. Her face went blank with incomprehension. And then, slowly, a horrifying understanding dawned. Her hand went to her mouth. No, she whispered. No, that's not possible. He told me. He promised me it was life sciences, research. He said it was for nerve regeneration, for people like... Her eyes met mine, wide with the final, ugly truth. He had used my disability, my pain, as the blueprint for his lie to her. Oh, God, she choked out, a sound of profound spiritual collapse. He said it was science. He said it was to help people. She dissolved, her head sinking into her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs that were silent. Torn from her, I slid out of the booth and went to her, putting my arms around her, holding my sister as she fell apart. When I got back into the car, I was shaking. Aurelian didn't speak. He just watched me, his gaze analytical. She's terrified, I said, my voice flat, and she's trapped by a mountain of debt she mistook for gifts. She has a choice, he said, his voice devoid of sympathy. It was the cold voice of strategy. Her husband or the truth, and Tamsin. He waited until I met his gaze. If she chooses him, if she goes back to that hotel and tells him every word of our conversation, we have to be able to survive that. The implication hung in the air. Piper was not just a victim. She was now a high-level liability. He was about to start the car when his phone buzzed, and buzzed again, a cascade of alerts. He picked it up, his thumb swiping across the screen, his jaw tightened. They're not wasting time, he said. He handed me the phone. It was a breaking news alert from the Port Orion Herald. IIB announces formal investigation into Fenlight District interference at port. Sources report a violent confrontation between rival smuggling rings, resulting in significant damage to port property. Rival smuggling rings, I read aloud, the words tasting like ash. They're framing you. They're making it look like a turf war. It's the standard play, he said, taking the phone back. Marrowgate and the IIB are partners. They create a narrative, and I'm the villain. My own phone buzzed. It was a push notification from a local gossip blog, the kind that fed on the scandals of the wealthy. The headline was Aurelian Cruz's newest accessory, notorious Fenlight boss seen getting cozy with handicapped activist Tamsin Kerr. Is the crime lord using a vulnerable woman as his new shield? The article included a grainy photo, clearly taken last night, of Aurelian helping me from his car. "They're smearing me," I whispered, the blood draining from my face. "They're painting me as your crippled mule." The words were base, designed to strip me of all agency, to reduce me back to the object of pity I had been at the wedding. My phone buzzed again, a text message. My mother. "I just saw an article. Tamsin, what have you done? You are embarrassing this family. After all we've done for you, stop dragging your poor sister into this war. It's men fighting with money and guns. It is not your place." A white-hot rage, purer and cleaner than any emotion I had felt, burned through the shame. My fingers were shaking, but not from fear. I typed one sentence back. "I'm not dragging her in. Mom, I'm pulling her out." I hit send. Aurelian had parked the car in a service corridor between two towering brick warehouses. The wind howled through the concrete canyon, a desolate, lonely sound. "They've made their move," he said, staring out the windshield. "Now we make ours. Her name is Nadia Stone. She's my attorney. She's handled Fenlight's legitimate business for a decade. She's brilliant and she's clean. From this moment on, you do not speak to anyone. Not the IB, not your mother, not the press. Anyone comes to you. You give them Nadia's card. You say nothing else." "They're right," I whispered, the fight suddenly draining out of me, leaving me exhausted. "I am vulnerable. I'm a liability. Look at what they're doing to you. Maybe I should just—" "Don't," he turned to me, his face harsh in the gray light. "Don't you dare." He was quiet for a long moment, the only sound the shriek of the wind. "My entire life," he said, his voice low and raw, "I have hated weakness. I've detested it." He looked away, out at the brick wall. I had a younger brother, David. He was soft. He wasn't built for this world. He got in with a bad crew, started using— I told him to man up, to be strong. I called him weak. His voice was flat, a recitation of a script he had played in his mind 1,000 times. The last time I saw him, I found him high. I told him he was a disgrace to our name. He died of an overdose 2 weeks later. It was Marrowgate product, cut with precursor, just like Seraph 13. I've spent the last 10 years tearing them down, and I've told myself I was doing it because I was strong and he was weak. He turned back to me, and his dark eyes were burning with an intensity that had nothing to do with anger. "Then I watched you last night. You, with your cane and your brace, in the middle of a war zone. You went back for that dock worker. You didn't hesitate. You were terrified, and you did it anyway." He reached out, his hand hovering, and then his calloused thumb brushed my jaw, a touch that sent a jolt through my entire body. "My definition of strength was wrong. Tamsin, you are not weak. You are the furthest thing from it." I was stilled by his confession, by the pain he held coiled inside him. I covered his hand with mine, our fingers lacing together over the center console. "Okay," I said, my voice steady again. "So what's the plan?" His hand tightened on mine. "We use the truth. We burn them to the ground with it, but we set the rules. Rule 1, I said, we don't sell out Piper. No matter what she chooses, she's a victim in this, not a player." "Agreed," he said without hesitation. "She stays off the board." "Rule 2, he said, his gaze hardening. "We don't use innocent people as bait, the dock worker last night." That was a mistake. It was too close. We hit Marrowgate and we hit Montalto, but we don't let anyone else get caught in the crossfire. Agreed, I said. So, where do we find the rest of the truth? He looked past me, toward the wealthy spires of the city's old quarter. In the one place Adrian would feel perfectly safe hiding it. The trail to Adrian Montalto's past was not digital. It was buried in paper. In the one place a man like him would believe was beneath anyone's notice, his sentimental college archives, stored in a climate-controlled unit under his mother's name. Nadia Stone, Aurelian's lawyer, had a talent for unearthing such things. By late afternoon, we were in Aurelian's car, heading out of Port Orion, leaving the smell of the sea behind for the pine-scented chill of the inland hills. Our destination was the Wyeth Observatory. It sat on a lonely peak overlooking the city, a relic of 19th century ambition, abandoned for decades. According to Nadia's intel, Adrian and his fraternity brothers used to hold their pledge rituals there. It was the kind of place a man like Adrian would return to, a place that held his sense of power. The lead was thin, almost non-existent, found in a box of Adrian's university photo albums. Tucked inside the back cover of a leather-bound album was a small, slim volume, a primer of classical motifs. Its dark green cover was embossed with a musical staff, but the notes were strange. They were just heads, no stems, and they were pressed into the cover, not raised. "It's a code," I'd said, running my fingers over the indentations back in the car. "A musical one," Aurelian agreed, glancing over. "No," I corrected, closing my eyes, letting my sense of touch take over, my brain processing the tactile data. "It's tactile, the positioning, the spacing. It's a variation of Braille, but it's inverted, debossed instead of embossed, to be hidden in plain sight. My fingers are sensitive. I'm trained for this." Now, standing in the observatory, my theory was put to the test. The place was a ruin. The great central room was circular, the floor littered with moldy wooden pews arranged in a spiral. Above us, the massive copper dome had a jagged hole where a panel had fallen away, letting a few sharp stars and the cold, damp air pour in. The place smelled of wet plaster, mildew, and the metallic tang of decay. We were alone. The only light came from Aurelian's heavy-duty flashlight and the weak beam of my phone. "Let's see it," he said, his voice a low rumble that was quickly swallowed by the cavernous space. I sat on one of the less decayed pews, placing the small music book on my knee. Aurelian trained his flashlight beam onto the cover. I closed my eyes again, shutting out the oppressive darkness, and let my fingers do the work. "It's not just notes," I whispered, my fingers tracing the patterns, the clusters of dots. "It's a ledger. The musical staff is the grid, the notes, their coordinates and dates." My fingers moved, translating the bumps and hollows into language. "This cluster, it's a cash drop. Tomorrow, 7 o'clock p.m., location, the name is encoded, PRAI. A sound. A single, soft scuff of a boot on plaster dust. It came from the shadowed archway that led to the spiral staircase. Aurelian's light snapped off. He was moving before I had even registered the danger, his body a solid wall in front of me. We were plunged into absolute darkness. The only light, the faint, indifferent stars through the broken dome. "Who's there?" Aurelian's voice was no longer a rumble. It was a weapon, sharp and cold, slicing through the dark. Silence, then the unmistakable click of a pistol's hammer being pulled back. "Aurelian Cruz!" A voice rasped from the darkness, a hired voice, rough with gravel. "Marrowgate sends its regards. They don't appreciate you stealing their inventory." A flashlight beam, brighter than Aurelian's, exploded in our faces, pinning us. A man stood in the archway, his face a mess of shadows, the gun level and steady. "And you," the man grunted, his light finding me. "The cripple. You've been busy." Aurelian moved. He didn't lunge. He grabbed his own heavy wool jacket, the one he'd been carrying, and with a violent spinning motion, he whipped it at the floor in front of him. A thick cloud of white plaster dust, decades old, erupted into the air, directly into the flashlight beam. The man choked, a wet, rattling cough, blinded by the dust he had inhaled. I can't. Go! Aurelian roared, shoving me toward the spiral staircase. Up now! He lunged into the coughing darkness. I heard a thud of a body hitting a pew, a grunt of pain. I didn't wait. I scrambled for the stairs, my cane finding the first step. The staircase was narrow, iron, and it spiraled up into the darkness of the dome's upper ring. My brace scraped against the metal, a god-awful ringing sound. I'm on you! Aurelian yelled from below. The man was coughing and swearing, his flashlight beam swinging wildly, creating a dizzying, strobe-like effect. Clang, clang, clang! My cane and brace on the metal steps. My heart was a fist, trying to punch its way out of my chest. My leg was on fire, the unaccustomed, frantic climbing sending jolts of agony up my hip. I reached a small landing, a platform just below the dome's open slit. I looked down. The man was on the stairs below Aurelian, climbing fast. His cough subsided. He was raising the gun. Move, Tamsin. I had nowhere to move. It was a dead end. I looked at the wall beside me. The old iron banister was bolted to the stone. One of the bolts was loose, its latch mechanism rusted but visible. The man raised his gun. End of the line, Cruz! Aurelian was trapped, shielding me with his body from below. I jammed the tip of my cane, the hard rubber end, against the rusty latch. I put my shoulders, my back, my entire body into one desperate shove. The metal groaned, it shrieked, it held. Now, I screamed at myself, and I lunged again, a guttural yell tearing from my throat. The latch popped, the bolt shot free, the entire section of the iron banister, rusted through at its base, gave way with a sound like a breaking bone. It didn't just fall, it swung down like a trap door, a heavy, 100-pound pendulum of iron. It slammed into the man, hitting him square in the chest. He screamed, a high, thin sound as the force ripped him from the stairs. He fell, tumbling into the blackness below, and landed with a sickening, final crack on the stone floor. Silence. Only the sound of my own ragged breathing, of Aurelian's, the smell of rust and cordite. Tamsin, he breathed, climbing the last few steps. He grabbed my arm, his hand shaking. Or maybe I was... Are you hit? No. I couldn't stop shaking. My leg, the one I had braced against the wall, gave out. It just stopped. The muscles, pushed past their limit, dissolved into jelly and fire. I collapsed against him. I've got you, he said. I've got you. There's a door. To the roof. He half carried, half dragged me up the last few steps to a heavy wooden door. He kicked it open, and we spilled out onto the flat, tarred roof of the observatory. The wind hit us, clean and cold, whipping my hair across my face. The entire city of Port Orion was spread out below us, a glittering, indifferent web of lights. From the valley below, the long, mournful hoot of a freight train echoed up from the bay. My leg was useless. I couldn't stand. The adrenaline was gone, and there was only the deep, throbbing ache, a prelude to the days of pain that would follow. I can't walk, I whispered, hating the words, hating the weakness. Aurelian didn't speak. He just bent, hooked one arm under my knees and the other around my back, and lifted me as if I weighed nothing. I started, humiliated, trying to find a joke. I'm not a princess in a tower. You don't have to. I'm carrying my teammate, Tamsin, he said, his voice rough as he moved toward the fire escape. Not a princess. Teammates don't leave each other on the roof. He carried me down the fire escape, his steps sure and steady, his body a solid, warm shield against the cold night. He didn't grunt or strain. He just moved. By the time we reached the parking lot, I had my face buried in his shoulder, hiding from the world, breathing in the scent of his wool jacket, now covered in plaster dust. He set me down gently, leaning me against the cold metal of his car door while he unlocked it. The patrol car must have been on a routine sweep of the hills. Its headlights cut the darkness before we heard its engine. It was moving slowly, sweeping the access road. "In," he said, his voice urgent. He opened the door, and I practically fell into the passenger seat. He was about to close it when he paused. The patrol car was still 100 yards away, but its light was coming. Adrenaline, stark terror, and the residue of that moment in the greenhouse, it all coalesced. I grabbed the front of his jacket. He looked down at me, his face illuminated in the approaching headlights. I pulled him down. He met me. It wasn't a kiss. It was a collision. It was all teeth and desperation, a frantic, wordless affirmation that we were alive. It was the taste of his sweat, the grit of plaster dust, and the sharp, sweet tang of the licorice candy I'd been chewing. It was short, hard, and utterly consuming. The headlights washed over us. He broke away, his eyes wild, his breath coming in pants. He slammed the car door, was in the driver's seat in a second, and had the engine on, the car pulling away just as the patrol car crested the hill. We drove without lights for the first half-mile, 2 shadows escaping down a mountain. My heart was a drum. I found the music book, still clutched in my hand. My phone, its screen cracked, was on the floor. I picked it up, my hands still shaking. "The code," I said, my voice hoarse. I finished it, just as he came. Aurelian just drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Praierie, Prairie, F-A-L-L, Prairie Fall. I read the last of my mental translation. It's a place. Inland, an herb farm. Farm to table. That's the cash drop. That's where Marrowgate's operation is. Aurelian looked at me, his gaze sweeping over my face, lingering on my mouth. "Prairie Fall," he repeated, the name a death sentence on his lips. "Then that's where we go." Prairie Fall was an insult to the word farm. It was a 20,000-square-foot monument to industrial denial, a series of massive, interconnected geodesic domes shimmering in the hazy inland heat. It was advertised as a revolutionary, sustainable source for high-end restaurants, a farm-to-table paradise. Inside, the air was hot, thick, and unnervingly humid, a synthetic jungle smelling of damp earth, fertilizer, and something sharp and chemical underneath. Rows upon rows of herbs, mint, basil. Rosemary grew under harsh purple LED lights, but in the restricted sections, visible through reinforced glass, were other plants' poppies, unnaturally vibrant, growing in perfect, terrifying harmony with the legitimate crops. The yield is unprecedented. Our host, a man named Kessler, was saying he was slick, with a smile that never touched his eyes and a watch worth more than my car. Our proprietary blend of hydroponics and aeroponic misting creates the perfect, controlled environment. Aurelian, playing the role of the skeptical, hard-nosed investor, snorted. "Your electrical overhead must be catastrophic. I'm not investing in perfect environments." "Kessler, I'm investing in profit margins. Show me the product." I was Dr. Kerr, a haptic engineering consultant, brought along to evaluate the delivery systems for their flagship product, my leg brace and cane, which had earned me pity at the wedding, now earned me a twisted kind of respect here. They saw me as a target demographic. "Ah, the product," Kessler beamed, leading us to a sterile white laboratory section. "Our crown jewel. We've synthesized the analgesic properties of our hybrid poppies into a non-narcotic topical. We call it Seraph Serum, a breakthrough in pain management." He gestured to a high-tech-looking device, a metallic pod with several sensors. "Dr. Kerr, your expertise would be invaluable. This is our haptic delivery model. It reads the user's nerve cluster inflammation and delivers a microdose of the serum." I played my part. I ran my fingers over the device, my face a mask of professional critique. "The feedback loop is sluggish," I said coolly. "Your interface is assuming a uniform nerve density. It's crude. You'll deliver inconsistent dosage." Kessler's smile faltered. Aurelian looked satisfied. "See, crude, your margins are being eaten by gimmicks." "We are still in the experimental phase," Kessler said stiffly, but the serum itself is flawless. It's stored in our main cold room, under strict controls. He gestured down a corridor. As we walked, I spotted it, a heavy-duty steel door, marked with a complex bioscanner keypad. But the sign on the door was deliberately banal: fertilizer storage, level 4 biohazard. The keypad was the tell. You don't put a fingerprint and retina scanner on a closet full of manure. I tapped my wrist cuff, a single sharp pulse, target acquired. Aurelian received it, his expression unchanged. He stopped, turning his skeptical gaze back on Kessler. Before I see your fertilizer, I want to see your power grid. You're running a massive operation here. If your grid fails, this entire tropical paradise dies in 3 hours. I want to see the generators. The generators? Kessler looked annoyed. They're on the far side of the compound. If I'm investing, Aurelian said, his voice dropping to a cold, hard level, I'm investing in infrastructure, not pretty leaves. Show me, now. Kessler, clearly intimidated, bristled but complied. Very well, this way, Mr. Cruz. As Aurelian and Kessler turned the corner, arguing loudly about kilowatt hours, I was left alone in the corridor. I had maybe 2 minutes. I moved to the high-tech panel. Nadia's intel packet had included several high-resolution press photos of Kessler from a recent agricultural award. In one, he was holding a plaque, his hand raised, his fingerprints clear. I had spent 3 hours at a 3D printer in Aurelian's safe house, creating a flexible, micron-thin silicone overlay. My hands were shaking. I slipped the invisible film over my thumb and pressed it to the scanner. The light flashed green. A heavy thud click echoed in the hall as the magnetic lock released. I slipped inside. I was not in the cold room itself, but a small, cramped technical anteroom. The air was frigid, the hum of massive cooling units vibrating through the floor. The only light was a sickly yellow maintenance bulb, casting long, warped shadows. Thick plastic curtains, the kind used in meat lockers, hung in the doorway to the main storage. The climb at the observatory, the sprint on the docks, it all hit me at once. A sharp, violent spasm seized my right calf, a pain so intense it stole my breath. I gasped, leaning heavily against the wall, my hand fumbling for the straps on my brace. I had to release the pressure. I unstrapped the carbon fiber, my fingers clumsy. The muscle underneath was rock hard, knotted and useless. The door behind me opened and closed. I spun, my heart stopping. It was Aurelian. He's occupied with a transformer, he said, his voice low. Then he saw my face, my hand braced against the wall, the brace hanging loose. You're hurt. I'm fine, I lied, my voice tight with pain. It's just a cramp. You're shaking, he stated. He stepped into the small room, his presence filling it, his shoulder brushing the plastic curtains. He didn't offer pity. He offered practicality. Lean on me. Fix it. He turned his back slightly, offering his shoulder as a stabilizing point. Grateful. I put a hand on it, letting him take my weight as I tried to massage the agonizing knot in my leg. It was useless. My muscle was too tight. He watched my failing attempt for a second. That's not working. He knelt. Before I could protest, he said, May I? I was too tired and in too much pain to argue. I nodded. His hands, the same hands I'd seen diagram a war on glass, closed over my calf. They were rough, calloused, but impossibly warm. He didn't just touch me. He assessed, his thumbs finding the epicenter of the knot. He began to work the muscle, a deep, systematic pressure that was halfway between agony and ecstasy. It was a purely functional, deeply intimate act. You push yourself too hard, he murmured, his focus entirely on his task. Look who's talking. I breathed, the pain finally beginning to recede under his grip. As he worked, his suit jacket and shirt rode up slightly, just above his belt, in the dim yellow light. I saw it. A pale, puckered line against the skin of his abdomen, a scar, old and white, shaped like a ragged crescent, a knife wound. I reached out, my fingers trembling, and traced the scar. He flinched. Not in pain, but in surprise. His hands stopped moving on my leg. He looked up, his dark eyes meeting mine. "An old argument," he said, his voice rough. "Marrowgate," I whispered. He nodded. "A turf dispute. A long time ago." I looked at him, the powerful, ruthless Aurelian Cruz, kneeling at my feet, tending to my weakness, all while bearing his own hidden wounds. The carefully constructed walls between us dissolved. "No one here," I whispered, my thumb still tracing the pale line of his past, "has to pretend to be strong alone." His gaze burned into mine. He rose slowly, his hand sliding from my leg up to my waist, pulling me away from the wall and into his space. The room was cold, but where he touched me, I was on fire. "Tamsin," he breathed, his voice thick. He lowered his head, and this kiss was not the desperate, adrenaline-fueled collision from the parking lot. This was slow, deep, and deliberate. It was a confession. It was the taste of his skin, the smell of the cold, and the absolute solid strength of his arms around me. My hands found his hair, my fingers tangling in the thick strands, pulling him closer. His hands moved respectfully, one spreading wide across the small of my back, the other holding my side, his touch firm and claiming. The kiss deepened, and a low sound vibrated in his chest. I felt myself melting against him, the pain in my leg forgotten, replaced by a surging, coiling heat. Beep, beep, beep. A shrill, digital alarm from the wall panel. We broke apart, breathing heavily, our foreheads resting against each other. The panel was flashing red. Temperature alarm? I had left the cold room door ajar. "Work," I panted, my voice shaky. "Work," he agreed, his voice rough. He stepped back, giving me space, though his eyes never left me. I refastened my brace, my leg now functional, and pushed through the plastic curtains. The main cold room was a massive vault filled with stainless steel vats. I found the main server rack, plugged in the drive, and hit the command. The file name was ledger_garden. It was massive. It copied slowly, the progress bar a tiny blue line crawling across my screen. The file transfer finished. I ripped the drive out, tucked it into my pocket, and pushed back through the curtains. Aurelian was at the door, listening. "He's coming back," he said. "He's not happy." We slipped out, closing the heavy door behind us. The lock engaged with a heavy thunk just as Kessler's voice echoed down the hall. "Completely unacceptable," he was shouting. "A waste of my time." We rounded the corner, our expressions cool and professional. "Ah, Kessler," Aurelian said. "We were just admiring your fertilizer. I've seen enough. My consultant and I need to confer." We were outside, walking briskly toward the car, the humid heat of the dome complex at our backs. We were 10 yards from the sedan when a sound split the air. Not a gunshot, a high-pitched electric whine, like a giant insect. "Down," Aurelian yelled. He didn't push me. He tackled me, twisting his body, covering mine with his own as we hit the gravel parking lot. A split second later, a series of hard pops slammed into the car, exactly where my head had been. One hit the steel frame of the greenhouse, not with a ping, but with a hard, dense thwack. "Drone!" he yelled, his breath hot in my ear. He was shielding me completely. "Hard plastic rounds, non-lethal, but they'll break bone." The drone whined again, repositioning for another pass. "The ditch." Aurelian pointed to a deep irrigation ditch 20 feet away, filled with muddy water. "On 3, 1, 2, 3. We rolled, scrambled, and half fell into the ditch, plunging into 2 feet of cold, murky water. We landed in an ungraceful heap, mud and water splashing everywhere. We heard the drone hover, then zip away, its mission complete, a warning. Silence. I was lying on my back in the mud, soaked to the skin, my hair smelling of algae. Aurelian was next to me, covered in the same filth, his expensive suit ruined. He looked at me. A slow smile spread across his face. I started to laugh, It was a breathless, hysterical sound, bubbling up from a place of pure, adrenalized relief. He laughed with me, a deep, rich sound that echoed in the quiet afternoon. We were alive, we were soaked, and we had it all. The drive back to Port Orion was mostly silent. The car's heater was on full blast, but I was still shivering. I must have drifted off, because I woke with a jolt, my head resting on Aurelian's shoulder. The car was dark. The only light, the green glow of the dashboard. He didn't move, his hand steady on the wheel. He thought I was still asleep. I watched him from under my lashes. He glanced down, not at my face, but at my hand, which was resting on my knee. I saw his expression change. He was looking at my hand, the hand that had decoded a tactile map, the hand that had built a communicator from a bracelet, the hand that had traced his scar. He was looking at the hand of a haptic engineer, a woman who used technology to make a compromised body speak. I felt the shift in him. It was the click of the final puzzle piece locking into place. This was not a rescue mission. This was not a war for his dead brother. He had chosen his side, and he had no intention of ever going back. The Garden Ledger data was a bomb, and we had 48 hours to decide where to detonate it. Marrowgate and Montalto, realizing what we had taken, did not wait. They struck first, and they struck dirty. The morning after Prairie Fall, the smear campaign began. It was no longer just a fringe gossip blog. It was a coordinated attack. The Port Orion Herald, the same paper that had quoted the IUB, ran a front-page story. Funds for felony. How Aurelian Cruz's Fenlight charity bribed a disabled activist to spy on a respected Port Orion family. They had pictures, spliced, grainy, long lens shots, one of Aurelian helping me from his car, juxtaposed with a photo of a known Marrowgate enforcer, one of me on the street, my face tight with pain, made to look like I was in the middle of a drug deal. The worst was a heavily edited photo from the wedding. They had isolated me and Aurelian, our heads close together during the waltz, and photoshopped it to look like he was passing me a package. The caption read, "The Handoff." I was no longer Tamsin Kerr. I was a prop, a vulnerable woman, a troubled activist, a crippled honey trap. They had taken my identity, my disability, and weaponized it, turning my most visible trait into a cartoon of villainy. Then came the IIB. We watched the press conference from the high-tech, paranoid security of Nadia Stone's office. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and a sharper suit, and she radiated a calm, lethal competence. On the massive screen, the IAB's regional director, a man with a soft face and empty eyes, stood at a podium. In light of the ongoing violence at the Port Orion docks, he droned, the Interstate Integrity Bureau is launching a full-scale investigation into all parties involved, including the Fenlight organization, the Marrowgate outfit, and their known associates. Associates, Nadia said, her voice dry as she sipped her coffee. That's you, Dr. Kerr. They're positioning you as a criminal conspirator. They're investigating both sides, I said, my stomach churning, as if Aurelian and Marrowgate are two sides of the same coin. That's the play, Aurelian said. He was standing by the window, a monolith of controlled fury. They muddy the water until the public can't tell the poison from the medicine. Then we clear the water, Nadia said. She turned to her desk, hit a single key on her computer. I'm leaking the Garden Ledger, not all of it, just enough. To who, I asked. Not to the press. They're compromised. Not to the IB. They're the enemy. She smiled, a thin, dangerous expression. I'm leaking it to an oversight committee, a new, very hungry, very ambitious agency out of Washington, the Federal Commerce Integrity Commission, the FCIC. She explained, the IIB was a regional player. The FCIC was a federal shark, designed to hunt down exactly this kind of high-level interstate corruption. By sending them the ledger, Nadia said, we are formally accusing the IIB of malfeasance. We are forcing their hand. They can't just investigate us. They now have to investigate Montalto. And what's more, the FCIC will be supervising them while they do it. We've just put a federal watchdog in the room with the corrupt cop. My phone, a new burner Nadia had provided, vibrated with a text from an unknown number. Fish market. 1 hour. I have to see you. P. Piper. This time, I went alone. Aurelian had offered to be my shadow, but I refused. This was my sister. I found her in the same booth, but she was a different woman. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, brittle anger. She was wearing a simple cotton dress, her hair pulled back, the massive diamond was gone from her finger. "I left him," she said, her voice flat. "This morning." "Piper, what happened?" "I signed his papers," she said. I must have recoiled. Because she held up a hand, I signed them, and I smiled. I told him he was right, that my family was a mess, that I chose him. I played the part of the perfect, dutiful, stupid wife. She reached into her bag and pulled out a tiny, metallic object, a digital audio recorder. "And then," she said, "I took the power of attorney papers he gave me, walked into his home office, and planted this under his desk while he was in the shower. I've been a fool. Tamsin, I've been a coward, but I am done." She slid the recorder across the table. "He had a call an hour after I left. With his mother, it's all there. The Seraph 13, the money laundering, the plan to frame Aurelian, the plan to have you discredited, to have you committed, to paint you as unstable." I stared at the recorder, this tiny, powerful piece of evidence. "Piper, this means divorce. It means you lose everything. The money, the house." "He promised me life sciences," she whispered, her eyes filling with a fierce, cold light. "He used your pain to lie to me. I don't want his things. I don't want his money. I want him to burn." The next meeting was one I had been dreading. My mother had summoned me. I met her in the sterile, beige lounge of her apartment building, a place that always smelled of lemon polish and old secrets. She was immaculate, as always, her grief and disappointment perfectly tailored. "Tamsin, this has to stop," she said, her voice low, urgent. "You are destroying this family. You are aligning yourself with a gangster. You are making Piper's life impossible." "Piper made her choice," I said, my voice quiet, "and I've made mine." "This isn't a choice. It's a tantrum. You've always been this way. Defiant, difficult. Why can't you just be quiet? Why must you always draw attention to your struggles?" "My struggles?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You mean my leg? Is that what this is about? You're ashamed?" "I am ashamed of this spectacle," she hissed. "This is not our world. This is a fight between bad men. You are going to be crushed, and you are going to drag our name down with you. Stop it, for Piper's sake, for my sake. Go away, Tamsin. Go to a clinic. Be unwell for a few months until this blows over." She was offering me the same escape route as Adrian, to be mad, to be weak. "I'm not choosing a war, Mom," I said, my voice shaking but my resolve like steel. "I'm choosing not to look away while men like Adrian Montalto poison people for money. And you're right, it is a spectacle. The truth is, you're just upset that your son-in-law, the man you were so proud of, is a monster. You're not worried about me. You're worried about your social standing." She slapped me. The sound was sharp, shocking in the quiet lounge. My cheeks stung, but I didn't flinch. I just looked at her. Her face crumpled. She saw what she had done. She saw the line she had crossed. She reached into her hair, her hand trembling, and pulled out a long, heavy pin of antique, tarnished silver. It was my great-grandmother's, a family heirloom. She pressed it into my hand, her fingers cold. "This was hers," she whispered, her eyes filled with a terrible, final grief. "She was a fighter. She would have been ashamed of me. Go. Do what you have to do. But Tamsin, bring our name back clean." She turned and walked away, her back straight, a perfect model of polite society, leaving me alone with the pin. The call came as I was driving back to Nadia's office. It was Aurelian. His voice was flat. "Dead. We've been hit. The Fenlight warehouse, the one holding our servers, our cash reserves. It was an inside job. I found him in Nadia's war room. The garden ledger was splashed across a giant screen, but he was staring at a different one, a feed from a security camera. It was static. "How much?" Nadia asked, her voice soft. "Everything," Aurelian said. "The physical cash reserves, the hard drives with our offshore accounts, my entire legitimate operation, my resurrection fund. It was all leveraged against those assets. He didn't just rob me, he beggared me." "An inside job?" I asked. "My head of security, a man I've known for 15 years. Marrowgate must have paid him double what I had." He turned to me, and for the first time, I saw not a trace of the ruthless boss. I saw the man he was 10 years ago, the one who had lost his brother. He was devastated. "This is what they do. Tamsin Mao," he said, his voice hollow. "They find your weakness, they corrupt, and they destroy. I can't fight them. They've won. I've lost everything." He was waiting for me to leave, to walk away from the man who was now just a gangster with no money. I walked to the table. I picked up the silver hairpin my mother had given me. I looked at the data on the screen Piper's recording, the ledger, the IEB's lies. "No, you haven't." I said. He looked up, confused. "You lost money. You lost brick and mortar. We have this." I tapped the screen. "We have the truth. We have Piper's testimony. We have the ledger. We have the FCIC. They took your cash. We're about to take their freedom." I put my hand on his, my fingers gripping his tightly. They were cold. "Losing money is better than losing our souls. Aurelian, you haven't lost a thing." His hand turned, his fingers lacing with mine. The grip was crushing. He looked at Nadia. The fire was back in his eyes. "The Montalto family," he said. "They're hosting an after-party for the wedding, tomorrow night, for their highest-level financiers. It's on their flagship yacht, the Sable Star, live music, fireworks." "It's the most public place in the city," Nadia said, a slow smile spreading. "They're doing it to project strength, to show everyone that the dock incident was nothing." "Then that's where we hit them," I said, the plan forming, wild and terrifying. In my mind, we don't just leak the truth, we broadcast it. I looked at the schematics for the yacht, which Nadia was already pulling up on a screen, the Sable Star. It's outfitted with a state-of-the-art LED lighting system, all along the hull, the masts, everywhere. It's all controlled from a central hub. I thought of my haptic cuff, of the patterns, of the language of vibration and light. "I can get into that system," I said. "I can write a script. I can hijack it. We can turn the entire side of that yacht into a billboard. We can display the garden ledger for the whole city to see." "A 900-foot-long confession," Aurelian breathed, the strategist in him catching fire. "And I," Nadia said, her fingers flying across her keyboard, "will make sure everyone is watching. I have contacts in the Citizens Jury program, a decentralized, multi-platform streaming network. They're immune to takedown notices. I'll give them the exclusive. By the time the fireworks start, every phone in Port Orion will be aimed at that boat. When that data goes live, it will be everywhere. They will never, ever be able to shut it down." The Sable Star was a blade of white steel, 300 feet long, slicing through the calm waters of Port Orion's harbor. It was an exercise in obscene wealth, a floating testament to Montalto's power. The yacht pulled away from the private dock precisely at sunset, bathing the teak decks and chrome fittings in a light of burnished, expensive gold. The sky was a painter's dream of rose and copper. On the sprawling aft deck, Adrian Montalto, the picture of a charming, victorious host, raised a flute of champagne. His voice, amplified by the yacht speakers, was smooth and confident. He toasted his financiers, his investors, and his partners, all of whom had gathered to celebrate his marriage and his success. Beside him, my sister, Piper, played the final, most difficult role of her life. She was stunning in an emerald green gown, her hand resting lightly on Adrian's arm. She smiled when he smiled, her gaze adoring, her entire posture radiating loyalty. She was buying us time, her performance so flawless it made my stomach ache with a mixture of pride and terror. We were invisible. We were the crew. No one looks at the technicians. We wore the standard black-on-black uniforms of the yacht's entertainment staff, our faces obscured by shadow and the sheer force of our insignificance. Aurelian carried a heavy diagnostic case, his shoulders straining the cheap fabric of the jacket. I wore a tool belt, my cane clicking softly on the deck, my leg brace hidden beneath the loose-cut trousers. We moved below decks, bypassing the champagne and the laughter, and descended into the hot, humming heart of the ship. The main engineering space was a labyrinth of insulated pipes and humming server racks, smelling of ozone and warm metal. "This is the lighting control hub," I whispered, finding the correct rack. I pulled a custom drive from my belt, my fingers sure and steady, and slid it into the main server port. The interface came alive. The system was sophisticated, but I had spent the last 24 hours mapping its architecture. It was built for spectacle, and I was about to give it one. "I'm in." My fingers tapped the haptic cuff on my wrist, a silent drumbeat. I wasn't just typing commands. I was uploading the Garden Ledger, translating its damning data into a haptic script, a language of light. The entire yacht's external lighting grid was now slave to my program, configured to display mode, waiting for a single trigger. "We have to get to the bridge," I said, pulling the drive. "The final execution command has to be sent from the master environmental console." We moved toward the crew ladder. As we entered the narrow corridor, a figure stepped out from a utility closet, blocking our path. He wore the same uniform, but his build was all wrong. He was heavy, thick-necked, and his eyes, when they landed on me, widened with a slow, dawning recognition. "You!" he growled. It was one of the men from the dock, the one who had been on the gantry above us. The girl with the stick. He didn't hesitate. He lunged, his big hands reaching for my throat. Aurelian moved to intercept, a blur of shadow, but I was a fraction of a second faster. It was instinct, not thought. The man's right hand shot out. I brought my walnut cane up in a hard, vertical block, the wood cracking against his wrist bone. He roared, a sound of pure pain and surprise, and his grabbing hand recoiled. He swung his other arm, a furious backhand aimed at my head. I pivoted hard on my left foot, using my body's full momentum, and drove my right leg forward. The hard, unforgiving edge of my carbon fiber brace connected with the side of his knee. I heard a wet, tearing pop. It was a sickening sound. His leg folded backward and he collapsed, screaming, his hands instinctively going to his ruined knee. Aurelian was on him before he hit the deck. He didn't waste time with a punch. His hand clamped over the man's mouth, stifling the scream, while his other arm applied a crushing, silent pressure to his carotid artery. The man struggled for a second, his body spasming, and then went limp. From his tool case, Aurelian pulled a thick, industrial zip tie and bound the man's hands. He gagged him with a greasy rag from the wall and, with an effortless lift, bundled him into the utility closet. "Teammates," he said, his voice perfectly level, though his eyes were blazing. He shut the door, plunging the corridor back into silence. The bridge. We took the crew stairs up, emerging onto the main deck service landing. A door to the passenger lounge hissed open. My heart seized. It was Piper. "Piper, what are you doing? You have to get off!" I hissed, pulling her into the shadows of the stairwell. "I saw him on the security feed," she whispered, her voice fast and breathless. She was pale, but her eyes were perfectly clear. "The man you just took down. I rerouted the camera loop. You have 2 minutes." She pressed a thin, platinum-colored card into my hand. "Adrian's personal key, level 5. It bypasses all security, including the bridge lockdown." "Piper, this is insane. Get on a tender. Leave now." "Not yet." She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "He's on the aft deck, getting ready for the fireworks. He's a monster. Tamsin, burn him." She looked at me, and for a second, I wasn't her broken sister. I was the older one, the one who had always patched her up. The dynamic had flipped. Her eyes held a lifetime of regret and a new terrible resolve. Go, make it count. She vanished back into the noise and laughter of the party. Aurelian swiped the card. The reinforced door to the bridge clicked open. The bridge was a cavern of dark glass and glowing blue instrumentation. A single junior officer sat at the navigation console. He looked up, his face hardening in surprise. "Authorized lighting diagnostic," Aurelian said, his voice snapping with an authority that left no room for argument. He held up a forged work order Nadia had provided. "We're running the pre-show sequence. Do not touch the environmental panel." The officer, cowed by Aurelian's presence, just nodded and turned back to his screen. We moved to the environmental console, the master hub. I slid my drive in. "I'm in. The script is loaded. It's networked." "Okay, it's slave to the pyrotechnic control. The instant the finale sequence gets the go signal, the ledger broadcasts." It was done. There was nothing to do but wait. Aurelian nodded toward a side door. "The wing deck. We wait there." We stepped out into the night air. The wind was clean and cold, whipping my hair across my face. We were high above the party, the music a faint, pulsing bass line far below. The lights of Port Orion glittered, a diamond web spread against the dark hills. A single test flare shot up from the yacht's stern, bursting in a silent spray of green sparks. Aurelian stood beside me, not touching, but I could feel the solid warmth of him, a wall of coiled tension. "When it goes live," he said, his voice a low rumble against the wind. "Everything changes. The IB, Montalto, maybe even my own organization. It all comes down." He turned to me, his profile a hard, handsome line against the city lights. "Are you ready for that?" I looked out at the water, at the reflection of the city. I've waited for this my whole life. Aurelian, a moment when I wasn't invisible. Aurelian Cruz. The shout was loud. "Official," we spun. The bridge door flew open. Two men in dark, conservative suits stood framed in the light, their IUB badges clipped to their breast pockets. The lead agent was the same soft-faced man from the press conference. He was flanked by two armed men who were not IIB. They were Marrowgate muscle. "Mr. Cruz, and you must be Dr. Kerr," the agent Davos sneered. "You are both under arrest for interference in a federal investigation." "On what grounds?" Agent Davos, Aurelian asked, moving to stand partially in front of me. "We have authorization to seize all data related to this vessel and to detain all persons of interest." "Do you now?" A new voice, as sharp and cold as ice. Nadia Stone. She stepped out from the bridge's navigation room, and she was not alone. She was flanked by a man and a woman in severe, perfectly cut suits that screamed a different kind of authority, federal authority. "Agent Davos," Nadia said, a thin, predatory smile on her lips, "your authorization has been superseded by order of the Federal Commerce Integrity Commission. This vessel, its crew, and all its data are now under federal protection." "What, this is my jurisdiction," Davos sputtered. "Not anymore," the female FCIC agent said, her voice flat. "Captain." The yacht's captain, a man with a face like weathered oak, stepped forward. "I have received the order from the FCIC. They have primary jurisdiction. Agent Davos, you and your men will remain on the bridge. If you interfere, my crew will escort you to the brig. Am I clear, Asim?" Davos's face was a mask of white, trapped fury. Nadia had checkmated him, using the yacht's own captain as the enforcer. From the deck below, the party music swelled to a dramatic, cinematic crescendo. Adrian's voice, triumphant and amplified, boomed across the water. "And now for the grand finale." "It's time," I whispered, turning to the console. The music hit its absolute peak, and then silence. All the lights on the Sable Star went out, plunging the yacht into a sudden, expectant darkness. The crowd below gasped in anticipation. I hit the execute key. Nothing. The console was dark. A single, blinking red icon appeared on the screen. A text box. System override manual kill switch engaged. Bay C4. "No," I breathed, my blood running cold. He installed a hardline switch, a manual disconnect. He's paranoid. Where Aurelian demanded, Bay C4. I frantically pulled up the schematic. It's not hidden. It's in the main engine observation hall, one deck below the party, in full view. He's daring us, Aurelian said, his voice a low growl. The first firework shrieked into the sky, a screaming whistle that exploded in a shower of red and gold. My mind was racing. The script, it's tied to the pyrotechnic display. The show lasts exactly 90 seconds. If I don't bypass that switch before the finale, the script fails. The data stream breaks. It won't work. We'll never make it, Aurelian said, his eyes on Davos, who was watching us, a slow, triumphant smile spreading across his face. I will, I said, my voice shaking. You have to keep them here. All of them. Create a distraction. Do not let them leave this bridge. I looked at him, my heart hammering against my ribs. Give me 90 seconds. I didn't wait for his answer. As the sky exploded in a riot of blue and silver fire, I slipped out the side door and ran. I didn't run. I couldn't. The engine observation hall was one deck below, a glass-walled gallery built for showing off the massive, thrumming engines. I half fell, half limped down the crew stairs, my cane clattering on the steel. 80 seconds. The air was hot, thick with the smell of oil and ozone. I saw the panel, C4 manual lighting array kill switch. It was set behind a reinforced glass plate, but the access hatch was beneath it, a narrow, dark crawl space barely 2 feet high. A shadow moved at the end of the hall, one of Davos's corrupt NIB agents, running hard. Aurelian, I screamed into the tiny radio Nadia had given me. I'm not clear engine room. He's coming. I didn't have time. I couldn't fit in the hatch with the brace on. My fingers tore at the straps on my calf, fumbling with the Velcro and steel clips. The brace came loose. I tossed it and my cane aside. My right leg, unassisted, felt like a column of wet sand, the vibration from the floor rattling my bones. 70 seconds. I dropped to my hands and knees and lunged into the black, narrow space. Cold metal scraped my back. The smell of grease and hot wiring filled my lungs. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm against the deep, seismic thud of the engines and the high, screaming whistle of the fireworks above. I was crawling on pure adrenaline and desperation, dragging my useless leg behind me. I heard a shout from the hall, a grunt, the unmistakable, solid sound of a fist hitting bone, final and heavy. Go! Aurelian's voice roared from the radio, tight with exertion. I'm on the door. He won't pass me. Go. 60 seconds. I found the box by touch, my fingers sliding over cold steel. It wasn't a switch. It was a keypad, but with no numbers. Just a small, flat aluminum panel. It's not a switch, I panted, sweat dripping from my hair, stinging my eyes. It's a verification panel. It's melodic. 50 seconds. The fireworks were a rapid-fire cannonade now, one explosion after another. Adrian's paranoia. He hadn't just used a key. He'd used a password only he would know. The music from the wedding, the music that had started this all. 3, 1, 4, 2. My fingers were trembling. I couldn't use the pad of my finger. The contact was too broad. I used my fingernail, tapping the aluminum panel, mimicking the rhythm, the cadence of the notes from the quartet. Tap, 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 pause, tap, mum, pause, tap, 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 pause, tap, tap. An agonizing silent beat, 40 seconds. The box clicked, a single, beautiful green light switched on, bathing the tiny, dusty space in its glow. The system was live. I scrambled backward out of the hole, pulling myself with my arms. As I emerged, I saw Aurelian, his jacket torn, standing over the unconscious body of the agent. He offered me his hand and pulled me to my feet. Above us, the fireworks hit their absolute peak, the grand finale, and the Sable Star lit up. It was not a light show. It was a 900-foot-long digital confession, broadcast for the entire harbor to see. The entire starboard side of the yacht was a massive, moving billboard. We saw it all, reflected in the glass of the engine room. Ledger_garden. Names, dollar amounts, shipping routes, the grainy, damning video from the Prairie Fall greenhouse showing the vats of Seraph 13, and then the audio file, Piper's recording, Adrian's voice, cold and clear, discussing the plan to discredit the cripple and manage the Fenlight problem. A sound wave hit us from the deck above. It wasn't music. It was a collective, human scream, a storm of pure chaos. We raced to the aft deck. It was pandemonium. Guests were shouting, pointing, their phones all out, live streaming the confession that was still scrolling across the yacht's hull. It's a lie, Adrian Montalto was screaming, his face a mask of purple rage, a fabrication. But it was too late. He saw us. He saw me. His eyes were reptilian. He lunged, not for me, but for the person closest to him, Piper. He grabbed her, yanking her back against him, and pulled a small, silver pistol from his jacket. He pressed the muzzle to her temple. "Shut it off," he shrieked, his voice breaking. "Shut it off now, or I swear to God, Tamsin, I'll kill her." Aurelian stopped, raising his hands, his voice calm. "Adrian, let her go. It's over." "It's not over." I moved forward, my hands up, my leg was buckling, but I didn't care. "He's right, Adrian," I called out, my voice clear over the din. "It's over. You're broadcasting your crimes to the entire city. Do you really want wife killer added to the list?" "Shut up! Who do you think will believe you love her?" "Adrian." I kept walking, step by painful step, using the sound of my voice as a weapon. "Who will believe you loved Anwan when you sold your soul to sell that poison?" "Tamsin, don't," Piper whispered, her eyes wide with terror. "He's right, Piper," Adrian snarled, his grip tightening. She never knew when to be quiet. "No," Piper said. Her voice was small, but it was steel. "She taught me when not to be. It was a move I had taught her when we were teenagers, a simple self-defense twist against an aggressive grip." Piper dropped her entire weight, grabbed Adrian's wrist with both hands, and bent her knees, snapping his arm backward. The gun discharged, a flash of orange, the bullet flying harmlessly into the sky. Adrian screamed as his wrist broke. The gun clattered to the teak deck. Aurelian was already moving, a single, powerful front kick. His boot connected with the pistol, sending it skittering across the deck and into the dark water. "IIB, stand down," Agent Davos roared, finally arriving, his gun drawn. "Cruz, you're under arrest." "He's unarmed, you fool," Nadia's voice cut through. Davos ignored her, his gun aimed squarely at Aurelian. He was going to shoot. "Agent Davos," the voice was new, amplified by a bullhorn from the dock. The yacht had drifted close, and a large black FCIC cutter was now alongside. Armed, tactical agents were flooding the gangplank. "By order of the Chamber of Interstate Equity, you are relieved. Stand down, or you will be charged with obstruction." Davos froze, trapped. The sky exploded in the true finale, a massive burst of white and gold light. It wasn't a celebration. It was an illumination, lighting up the truth for everyone to see. The guests were silent, their phones held high, broadcasting the arrival of the federal agents. Adrian was on his knees, clutching his broken wrist as they cuffed him. He was still muttering, "It's just business. It was just good business." It was almost over. I leaned against a railing, my body finally giving out. "Aurelian," I whispered. He turned to me, a slow smile of pure victory spreading across his face. "It's always the last one. A man I didn't recognize, a waiter, a guest. A final Marrowgate assassin slid from the crowd, a steak knife in his hand. He lunged for me. Aurelian moved faster than I thought possible. He shoved me aside, taking the blow himself. The knife went deep into his side. The man was tackled by 3 FCIC agents. Aurelian staggered, his hand going to the wound, his face pale, his smile turning into a grimace. He slumped against the bulkhead. "No," I crawled to him. Blood was pouring between his fingers. Dark, arterial blood. "No, no, no." "Tamsin, he gasped. I grabbed a stack of cocktail napkins, shoving them against the wound. Pressure, I need pressure, I yelled to a terrified guest. I pressed down with all my weight. Look at me. Aurelian, look at me. Pressure, elevate, breathe steady. You are not dying. Look at me. He looked at me, his eyes glassy, but that old fire still there. He managed a pained, lopsided grin. Orders received. The docking was a blur. The sounds were a chaotic symphony of sirens, the thumping of a media helicopter, and, strangely, cheering from the civilians gathered on the pier. Piper found me as they were loading Aurelian into the ambulance. She just grabbed me, her arms like steel bands. You did it, she sobbed into my shoulder. You pulled me out of hell. I held her, the two of us standing on the solid dock, the rocking of the yacht finally gone. From now on, we walk on our own, I whispered, my cheek against her hair. But we walked together. The hospital room was white, sterile, and smelled of iodine and the sea. The lights were stark, buzzing faintly. He had been in surgery for 4 hours. He was lucky. The knife had missed his kidney by millimeters. He woke from the anesthetic, his eyes blurry, finding me in the chair beside his bed. I hadn't left. He didn't speak. He just moved his hand, his fingers searching for mine. I took it. I held his calloused, strong hand, and I placed it against my cheek, holding it there. He closed his eyes, a small, shuddering sigh escaping him. I leaned in, my hair brushing his face. I kissed him. It was not the kiss from the greenhouse, full of fire, or the kiss from the car, full of adrenaline. It was a short, clumsy, desperate kiss, tasting of his dry lips, antiseptic, and the salt of the tears I hadn't realized I was shedding. He kissed me back, a weak but determined pressure. We have, and he whispered, his voice a dry rasp. So many nights to burn, but tonight, Tamsin, we survived. We didn't just survive, we rebuilt. Months later, the name Montalto was synonymous with disgrace. The IEB was gutted. Marrowgate was shattered. An old, brick-walled Montalto logistics warehouse by the water, seized by the FCIC, had a new sign. Hearthline Lab, my lab. It was filled with 3D printers, haptic interfaces, and a team of engineers. We were building technology to give voice to bodies that struggled to be heard. Aurelian's Fenlight organization had gone legitimate, forced into the light, under the watchful eye of the FCIC. The Resurrection Fund was dissolved and reborn. His new business was clean restaurants, transparent logistics, urban renewal. The war for Seraph 13 was over. The grand opening of Hearthline Lab was loud, bright, and packed. The music wasn't a cold waltz. It was a brassy, joyful swing band. I was standing by the window, watching the harbor. I wore a new brace, lighter, sleeker, one I had designed myself. My cane was polished walnut. Aurelian approached. He wore a dark suit, no tie, and the scar on his side was just a memory. He stopped in front of me, the crowd noise fading around us. He didn't bow. He just held out his hand. "This time," he said, his voice a warm, familiar rasp that still made my heart skip. "You lead." I took his hand. I stepped onto the floor. He accommodated my rhythm. I accommodated his. Our steps weren't perfect, but they were ours. They luati, a messy, joyful, real dance. The crowd parted, making way. Outside the massive warehouse windows, the ocean breathed in, and it breathed out. And for the first time in my life, I knew exactly what it was saying. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you are tuning in from. Please comment below. Let me know where you are. And share your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button to help this story reach even more listeners.